Good morning, and welcome to the Forum, where we hear a variety of opinions. The Forum is only one of the many programs presented by the Institute for Continued Learning at the University of California in San Diego. The Institute, or ICL as we like to call it, is part of the university's Extended Studies Division and offers classes and lectures twice daily for its 350 members. Our forum guest today is Carol Lamb, United States Attorney for the Southern District of California. Ms. Lamb was sworn in by presidential appointment in November 2002. Prior to her appointment, she was a judge in the Superior Court of San Diego, where she presided over the criminal court calendar. From 1986 to 1997, she served as an assistant U.S. attorney in California and was chief of the Major Frauds Division, where she convicted several high-ranking members of the Chicago organized crime family called La Cosa Nostra. And last night in my mail, I found the San Diego Magazine for June, and they have a wonderful article in there about women of power in San Diego. And our guest today, Ms. Lamb, is mentioned. And here's what they say about her. United States Attorney Carol Lamb tells of the time she was second chairing a major case in the San Diego office, and the prosecution team was debriefing a man who was a cooperating witness. In the room were the lead prosecutor, a man, 6 male FBI agents, and Lamb. Halfway through the meeting, she says, the witness looked over at her and said, "Can I have a cup of coffee?" After a shocked silence, one of the FBI agents, who knew Lamb well enough to anticipate the reaction, jumped to his feet. "I'll get it," he said, and ran out of the room to fetch the coffee. "I was very grateful to that FBI agent," says Lamb. "I certainly hope I'm judged by my capabilities and not my gender. But as a woman who holds a job that always has been held by men, I have to confess I enjoy breaking the mold." Welcome to ICL, the Institute for Continued Learning, Ms. Lamb. We look forward to the comments of a woman who likes to break the mold.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. What I didn't tell San Diego Magazine was after I tasted that FBI agent's coffee, I made the coffee after that. This is my greatest honor to have this opportunity to talk to you about the United States Attorney's Office in the Southern District of California and what we do. Today's talk is entitled Major Areas of Responsibility by the United States Attorney's Office, and I think the way that I would like to begin talking about that is to describe for you a little bit what our office is and what it does. The United States Attorney's Office in the Southern District of California is one of 93 United States Attorney's offices throughout the United States. It is one of 4 in California, the others being located in Sacramento, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. We are the 6th largest U.S. Attorney's Office in the country, San Diego being the 7th largest city in the United States. And our office currently has 121 attorneys, including myself, and a support staff of about 170, so it's about a 300-person office. What is the United States Attorney's Office? And to understand that, you really have to understand a little bit about what the Department of Justice is. The Department of Justice, of course, the main headquarters is in Washington, D.C. The Attorney General, John Ashcroft, heads the Department of Justice. Each United States attorney in each of the 93 districts is a presidential appointee as well. The United States Attorney's Office is in many respects sort of the federal equivalent of the District Attorney's Office. It is responsible for enforcing all federal laws as well as enforcing civil laws that apply to the federal government. There are lots of crimes that transcend state or local borders, and that is where I think the United States Attorney's offices really find their place, so to speak. That is, at least in my mind, how things translate best into federal law enforcement. We have federal grand jury power, the power of the federal grand jury to subpoena witnesses across state lines. We have mutual legal assistance treaties and extradition treaties with other countries that allow us to have law enforcement cooperation across international borders as well. And because all the United States attorneys work for the Attorney General and the President, we are in a sense one family that works together and cooperates with each other in the enforcement of federal law. So what are our major areas of responsibility? And as I describe this to you, I think it's important to remember that things change over time. You'll find different priorities at different points in the nation's history for United States Attorney's offices and for the Department of Justice in general. Being the United States Attorney in the Southern District of California has its own unique challenge, almost unique. We share this challenge perhaps with Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, as well as Florida to some extent. And that is that we are a southern border region, a southern border district, and this creates a challenge and a responsibility that many United States Attorney's offices don't have. The border creates for our office what I would call an automatic caseload of thousands of felonies a year. If we wanted it to be, it could be hundreds of thousands of felonies, but we simply have to deal with the border within the resources that we have. And it is a constant balancing, frankly, with our law enforcement agencies, with the immigration policies, and with the needs of the community with respect to border enforcement. At any given time, approximately 35 to 40% of my attorney resources are devoted to basically reactive crimes along the border. That is to say, smuggling crimes or people who have serious criminal histories who are in the country despite the fact that they have been previously deported some dozens of times. It is a challenge for the office, and it is a challenge for a community to keep the border situation in a status where we are not being overbearing, but we are also fulfilling our responsibilities with respect to the safety of the community. Let me give you an example. The average felony caseload for a United States Attorney's Office, understanding that there's a great variety in terms of the size of populations, but the average filings range from about 700 to 800 felony filings a year. Last year, our office prosecuted 3,700 felonies in the Southern District of California, which covers San Diego and Imperial counties. Of those, approximately 2,000 were prosecutions of illegal aliens who are illegally in the United States following deportation. But I do want to point out that our prosecution guidelines do not have us prosecuting people who simply return to the country to work or for family reasons. We prosecute people with very serious criminal histories who come to the United States and commit crimes here repeatedly. And those are the people who are prosecuted under this statute. The remaining border-related crimes are primarily alien smuggling and narcotics smuggling cases. And anybody who lives in San Diego probably has an idea of what the border situation is and how many Border Patrol agents and ICE agents and DEA agents it takes simply to keep control over the border. But the border is not our only responsibility. Since 9/11, terrorism has been the primary responsibility or the primary area of concern for the Department of Justice as a whole. Terrorism is the department's highest priority. San Diego is a particularly vulnerable district, in my view. We have a land border and an ocean border. We have the largest concentration of military installations in the country and one of the 2 large marine training facilities up at Camp Pendleton. We also have a nuclear reactor. We are also probably about 20 miles from the Tijuana airport in Mexico. We had, in 2001, 2 of the known hijackers from 9/11 living in our district, being educated and training in our district. And that in itself is reason for serious concern. A number of prosecutions have taken place in the office since then, primarily on immigration-related crimes for people who had associations with or were highly suspected to be associated with the hijackers. We have also had a very high-profile case that arose out of a narcotics investigation where 3 individuals are being prosecuted for being willing to trade drugs for Stinger missiles that they admitted to an FBI undercover agent they were willing to or intended to give to the Taliban, which they said was the same as Al-Qaeda. 2 of those individuals have now pled guilty. Narcotics is a serious issue for our office because of our close proximity to the border. This past year, we announced an overarching indictment of the leaders of the Arellano Felix cartel. We have taken down and prosecuted a major ketamine trafficking ring that stemmed out of manufacturers who are south of the border, but distributed their product north of the border. We have also embarked on prosecutions of Hell's Angels and aspects of that organization that were dealing in narcotics to our young people as well. We have engaged in demand reduction programs for methamphetamine and other narcotics that are being abused, primarily by our young people as well. Corporate crime. Corporate crime is also a high priority of the Department of Justice. And as all of you know from the Enron scandal, WorldCom, and many of the other corporate prosecutions that have taken place and have really affected seriously the underpinnings of our economy, corporate crime is something that really needs to be dealt with and can very effectively be dealt with by the federal government. New laws have come into effect. Many prosecutions, in the hundreds, have taken place since the Enron scandal first broke. Here in San Diego, we've had 2 very large prosecutions. One was of PIN Fund, which was a North County establishment that was basically engaging in mortgage funding fraud. It was perhaps to date the largest single corporate fraud case handled by the Southern District of California. It was a $350 million operation, and it no longer exists. Its primary, the people who are running the company are in prison now. We have had several guilty pleas in the Peregrine case regarding corporate accounting fraud, and that was right here in San Diego. So San Diego is a very interesting district with its combination of population, its location along the border, and it creates a great many challenges for our office. Some of the crimes that I've described, you might say, well, why does the federal government handle that, and why doesn't the state handle that? And let me describe a few other initiatives that the Justice Department has where you might ask that question. We have an initiative to tackle illegal firearms that flood our streets and that young people can get their hands on. Child pornography is another very important initiative that the Attorney General has announced. Human trafficking, the holding of individuals who have been smuggled into the country, holding them for either servitude reasons or sexual slavery. Computer crime and theft of intellectual property, another high priority of the Justice Department. Many of these areas are areas where the state also has jurisdiction under their statutes. Narcotics prosecutions, child pornography, bank robberies, and civil rights come to mind immediately. I view this as a positive thing. I think that there are some areas of the country where the local prosecutors or the state prosecutors are engaged in turf battles with the U.S. attorneys over who's going to prosecute what case. I think our district attorney, Bonnie Dumanis, and I have reached a very good understanding and agreement that there's enough crime for everybody to go around. And we work very cooperatively to see who has the best ability to prosecute any particular kind of case, who has the most accessible statutes, and in some instances where the penalty more suits the crime in our views. And we work cooperatively and we divide the cases in that manner. There are some crimes, however, that only the federal government can deal with, and that is because they are federal programs. And so fraud against those federal programs is really our responsibility. For example, federal tax laws. People who commit crimes against the United States with respect to fraud in reporting or paying taxes, that is our responsibility. Medicare fraud. Let me give you an example about Medicare fraud, and this is an area that that I worked in when I was an assistant U.S. attorney. But even 10 years ago, when I was doing those cases, the amount of money being paid out by the Medicare and the Medi-Cal program, or the Medicaid program, which is half funded by the federal government, was such, and the amount of fraud was such, that it was estimated that $40 to $50 million a day was lost to fraud out of our Medicare and Medicaid systems. That is a tremendous amount of money, and it has a direct impact on what is available to pay for necessary medical services. So that is yet another high priority of the Justice Department. Bankruptcy. Our bankruptcy courts are often used by people who are not being honest about their financial conditions, and there is essentially a fraud committed in the bankruptcy proceedings. That, again, is a federal responsibility, and it is our responsibility to prosecute people who commit bankruptcy fraud. The same with programs such as Social Security. Social Security is, again, a federal program, and fraud against the Social Security program is our responsibility to prosecute. We have a civil division, as does the Department of Justice and every U.S. Attorney's Office, and our civil division has a very different kind of responsibility. Our civil division defends the United States in lawsuits brought against the United States, and we have, I believe, the highest concentration of medical centers because of our federal medical centers, because of the high concentration of military in our district. Our civil division does really a phenomenal job of defending the United States against malpractice lawsuits brought against the federal government in the military hospitals and military medical centers. They also defend the United States in civil rights actions brought against federal officers, and a myriad of other types of lawsuits that are brought under the federal laws. The civil division also has a section that handles affirmative civil litigation. And what does that mean? That means if somebody commits a fraud against the United States and obtains money wrongly from the United States, our civil division can bring a lawsuit under the Civil False Claims Act to recover treble damages and penalties. So if somebody defrauds the Medicare program, we can prosecute them criminally and bring a civil lawsuit against them. The same for defense contractors, for example, who may defraud the government in the context of defense procurement fraud. We can bring a lawsuit against them. So how do we choose among this myriad of priorities? How do we decide what to prosecute? I often tell federal agents that with whom we work that the best cases are made from the best facts. It's not always a dollar figure. It's not always a just absolute amount of narcotics that makes a very good case. What makes a very good case are good facts. But beyond that, Suppose you have good facts still when you only have 100 attorneys and you have so many things to do. How do you decide? What's important to us is to be as efficient and effective as possible in our prosecutions. What I think the U.S. Attorney's Office can do effectively with the assistance of the federal grand jury and the laws that we have is build cases that are based on organizations. And it almost doesn't matter what kind of topic you're speaking about. You can be talking about a narcotics case, a fraud case, a child pornography case, or a postal theft case. But if you can work a case up to the level where you understand the larger context of the crime, and you're not just taking crime one individual at a time, but you're seeing a whole organization or a whole ring, I think that is the type of case that we can do very effectively, and that is what we try to work our cases into. We work with many wonderful federal agencies. These would be the federal equivalent of the police or the sheriff. They are the law enforcement agents for the federal government. The FBI, of course, the DEA, the Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigations Division. There are many agencies affiliated with the military, Defense Criminal Investigative Service, the Naval Investigative Service are two examples. We have the Health and Human Services Inspector General's Office that polices the Medicare program for us. And these agents are the ones who go out and do all the really hard work, the legwork. They interview witnesses, they collect documents, they collect evidence. Of course, the new Department of Homeland Security, which swept under its umbrella the former INS, the former Customs Agency, and some other agencies as well. They do most of our border enforcement work as well. So there is a lot of balancing and juggling that goes on in the U.S. Attorney's Office, because all of these agencies, of course, want their cases prosecuted as well. And that is, for our office, probably the greatest challenge, is making sure that we are doing a responsible job for the community in terms of how we balance our caseload and bring effective prosecutions in every area, not only for the purpose just of pure law enforcement and tackling crime, which is, of course, our primary purpose, but also it's important from the office's workings internally that we maintain some expertise in every kind of case, so that when a serious problem arises in a certain area, we have the expertise within the office to handle that type of prosecution. So that is my overview of what we do in the United States Attorney's Office. It is a wonderful office, an extremely challenging job, and it is, as I tell our attorneys, the greatest honor you can have as an attorney is to represent the United States. I think it is something that everybody should strive for and have an opportunity to do, if possible, in their lives, because it is a luxury, frankly, to be able to represent the country and therefore to be able to always use as your guide as to what you do the right thing. That is the only guide, to do the right thing. And that is something that I think all of our attorneys feel, and it is what makes it, if you were to ask most of them, I think they would tell you it is the greatest job in the entire world. So let me at this time just thank you so much for this opportunity. In case I have not sufficiently instilled in you how much pride we feel in representing the government, I'm just going to tell you that when new attorneys do come into the office, I tell them a couple of things. But one of the things I do tell them is that when you come into the office, you're going to be doing lots and lots of different cases. But and many of the cases that you're going to be doing are cases that are that are generated by our proximity to Mexico and the border situation. And it's quite, it has become evident to me that, you know, the situation being along the border is one that we are never going to win a war against narcotics and smuggling. There is simply too much. We can't address all of it. Not every single person can be prosecuted, and that's very difficult. That's a very difficult decision to accept. It's difficult for us, and it's difficult for the agencies. It's difficult when you see people being smuggled in a trunk and being told that that doesn't meet prosecution guidelines. That's a bad thing. But it's also very difficult for our office because we have attorneys who do many of these cases, and they do them over and over and over again, and it never seems to stop. It keeps coming. But what it is and what we are doing is, I think, critical to how we perceive ourselves as federal prosecutors, because what we are doing along the border, as in other areas of federal law enforcement, is that we are taking a moral stand. We are drawing a line and saying this is not acceptable conduct, and we may not be able to address all of it, but we are trying to address the worst, and that is important for the community. It is important for the community to understand that somebody is out there and somebody will enforce these laws, because to not have that, I think you all know, the line would slip pretty fast. So I think what our attorneys do is a very noble thing, and they do it without complaint, and they do it very well. So I'm extremely proud of the office and what we do in this district. That's what I have to say to you today, and again, I am so glad that all of you were interested enough to, in what the U.S. Attorney's Office does, to come here today, and I want to thank you very much for this opportunity.